RAAA Roadshow wrap-up, training and checking update, and the magical OBS button. What does it actually do? I'm going to talk about that and more coming right up. So strap in and let's get into it.
Standby star 9000, 1013, Kilo 25. Coordinating aileron and rudder, bank, balance, bank pressure rolling to 30 degrees. That's 30 degrees there. 3 left, runway 29, 1331.
G'day everybody and welcome to episode 142 of the Flight Training Australia podcast. The podcast all about flight training and flying in Australia and beyond. G'day, I'm your host, Trent Robinson. Welcome and thank you for joining me. Another beautiful Monday, or whenever you're listening to this, and the weather is just stunning. Down south, not so much. I know there's some absolute Arctic blasts going on, some freezing conditions, but it is all about to get better as we're starting to approach summer down south and the wet season up north. It's already there's a slight change in the air. It's definitely getting hotter at the moment. I jumped in the pool today to give it a bit of a clean, and I didn't have to work my way in so quick. It was or so slowly. I could get in pretty quick. The water's warmed up a bit, and everything's just beautiful. But certainly hot. Went for a bike ride, middle of the day. Probably not the best plan, but I'll have to get up a bit earlier from now on, I think. But it's been a really good week. I got back from Sydney last week and then headed out to Darwin Airport for the RAAA Roadshow. And if you don't know what the RAAA is, it's the original, formerly Airline Association of Australia, now the Regional Aviation Association of Australia. And it's a group of fantastic people across all walks of aviation, really. And I've got to say, I've been impressed so far, doing some great work. I don't even know everything about it, so I'm not even going to try and pretend. But the things that I've heard that they've done already, and evidence of that, and being really active in industry and really wanting to be proactive, represent industry, help make change, and just make everything better. So really great to meet everybody. The current president, Rob Walker, the chair of RAAA, Mal Sharp, and everyone else on the board there. Was just fantastic to meet and participate in the 2-day roadshow that was here. Firstly, down at the RFDS Stokes Hill Wharf, sitting down there, go to check out all the things on display there, and then some drinks down on the waterfront. And then the following day was some really great discussions about all sorts of things, which I'll run through now just briefly. And I also got to chat to a few key figures there on the issues that I've been raising of late with the aircraft standards and things. There's a lot of support in that, and talking to a few representatives from other flying schools around the countryside. So really glad to see the right questions being asked and the interest that's being shown, recognising some of the issues that we're faced with at the moment. And I'm really looking forward to exploring all that further and letting you guys know when I know something more about it all. All right, but there's some of the interesting things that were mentioned in the forum, which I had not heard of before, was things like HF. Now, a lot of you I know have never actually used an HF radio before, but up here we do, and they are problematic at times. And not to mention that, but newer aircraft, they're getting harder and harder to replace. New aircraft tend not to come with them, or if they do, they're extremely expensive. And a good mate, Elon Musk, apparently, is looking at working with some different companies, a company called Skycraft, to launch some VHF ADS-B satellites, which essentially will be looking to provide worldwide VHF coverage, pretty much replacing HF, which would just be pretty amazing. So there's some tests and things going on at the moment. Apparently the quality is just brilliant and just sounds like a normal VHF conversation. So very much looking forward to hearing more on that. And when I find out more, I will let you all know. The overall process, we heard from ATSB, we heard from Air Services, had a chat from the CEO from Bassair, and the other interesting part, which I was keen to have a hear from, was Greg Imlay, who's currently looking after all the flight operations regulations transition, which is the training and checking systems that is just, it's inbound. It's been delayed twice, but as I've talked about previously, it is now finally in, and manuals were required to be submitted by August, just recently, just last month. And then this is all going to be coming into play in February the 28th, basically the end of February next year. So everyone's manual should be in. Any new companies will need to put together a training and checking system in place. And the manual is very easy to put together. If need be, you can do this on the MATS tool. And that's the manual authoring tool that CASA has put together. If you're not familiar, most HOFOs and WHOs and all that sort of thing will be well familiar with it. But there's pretty much a plug and play template on there. And as always, you can flesh it out and massage it however you want. So it shouldn't take too long to get together. Once that's done, as long as it's been cross-referenced with all the things it needs to do, CASA aren't going to be approving that. Instead, they're going to be getting a self-assessment worksheet, which is signed off by the CEO to say that it meets the requirements. And that's based on the CEO knowing their obligations and requirements there. So they will double check, because if it's not right, then that's going to be on them. So there's a little bit of trust going there. And then the only thing CASA will be approving is the nominated head of training and checking. So there is information on the website as to the checklist that a hot C will need to pass and what they're looking for that particular person. The hot C can also be outsourced. And this is all going to be coming into play, like I said, by the time February comes in. So any normal operations, normal flying, that sort of stuff can be done by a nominated training captain within the company. And that can just be anyone who knows what they're doing. Does not need to be an instructor. But as soon as the non-normal activities are taking part, so simulating emergency operations, like I say, playing with the throttle and turning things on and off and all that sort of stuff, then an instructor rating is required. And that's all I'll say about that for now. I think it's going to be a really good thing. It will require more training from pilots and companies getting ready for OPCs. The OPC will actually replace the flight review. So if you're working in a 135, 138 sort of company, then you won't actually do a flight review anymore. It will be an OPC. The only exception to that is if you're going to be doing an IPC, if you're an instrument pilot. But it should be interesting setup. The thing to watch, though, is if you do get checked by a check pilot who is not a CASA check pilot, then you won't actually have a flight review outside of the company. So that is one thing to watch. But otherwise, that'll be all coming in over the next few months, and companies will start to transition onto that. All right. What else did we talk about? I think that was about it. There's a lot of other exciting little things that are coming out of that meeting that I had, and in discussions with others. So like I said, I'll look forward to sharing that with you when I know more. Now, the flying I've been doing with some pilots lately, be it VFR, night VFR, and IFR, the OBS button, there's a lot of interesting rumors and opinions, I guess you could say, on what the OBS button does and when it can be used and how it should be used. And I think it's one of these things that's a mountain's been made out of a molehill on how complicated people, or how confused people get and how complicated they've made it. So first of all, for those who have no idea what I'm talking about, the OBS button is on the GPS. Now, depending on the type of GPS you have, it's either on the touchscreen or it'll be on a button like on the Garmin 430. It's along the bottom there. And some people will tell you it stands for obstruct. Now, this isn't the case. That's a bit of a tongue-in-cheek term, and it certainly does perform an obstruction function. But it stands for Omni-Bearing Selector. Now, what is an Omni-Bearing Selector, you say? Well, a VOR or VHF Omni Range Beacon is a VOR I'm sure you've all seen on the ground. It's usually in a circular format and it throws out radials. So from the center of the antenna, spits it out, and it goes south every east, west, north, every radial of 360 degrees. And those are omnis or omni range beacons. They are the radials that radiate outwards. And I can use the omni bearing selector to pick which one I might want to align. So my VOR instrument will pick up that particular radial, show me where it is in relation to me hitting to or from the beacon, and I can navigate and intercept left or right and hold that track as required. Now, not many people use VORs much these days. You should be, because they're still around and they're still very, very functional. And you'll probably find that it gives you a far better understanding on GPS intercepts. But anyway, that's another discussion and probably better suited to a video, because I'm definitely not going to try and describe to you all to visualize an intercept. But the OBS button for the GPS, I mentioned the word obstruct earlier, and it is a good descriptor. The obstruction of the flight plan flow. Okay, so when we've got one waypoint and it flows on to another, so we've got B coming up and C is the next one in the sequence. As we approach B and overfly it, it'll then go to C. Now, I might not want it to do that. For example, at nighttime, I'm going to do some circuit work at B, so I'd like to know how far from B I am. So we can press the OBS button and that will obstruct the flight plan flow. It'll lock in B and it'll just count up. And then as I go back over it, down and up and down, and give me distance reference that waypoint. I can also turn my course bar and track in and out on different radials and headings for that particular waypoint. So it's really, really handy and absolutely necessary when we're doing things like holding patterns and referencing for circuit work and that sort of stuff. Now, you may have noticed I just said we can go from B, overfly B, and go on to C. Now, sometimes C is further back behind me. And so if you can imagine the top of a triangle, if I go all the way to the peak of the triangle to then come back down the right-hand side, I'm going to have to overshoot, come all the way over, back down towards the outbound track, towards the southeast, if you want to try and visualize that, and down the other side of the triangle. What the GPS does is different to what a VOR would do. If we're a VOR, we'd have to do that. We'd have to overshoot and then probably do a left-hand turn and then come back down the southeast and track down the wall. A GPS will cut the corner and it will decide on how far we're going around the corner based on your ground speed and the track that we need to do. It will work out then how far away from Bravo or the peak of the triangle before it turns right and heads back down the other side. So we'll never actually get to B. We won't overfly it. All right. And this is turn enabling, turn prediction. There's a few terms there, but B is a flyby waypoint. So we don't actually need to cross over the top. Now, what's all this got to do with OBS, you say? Well, what OBS will do is stop that from happening. It will just forget about C and it will be B only. And if you can imagine like a double-bladed lightsaber, there we go. I finally got a Star Wars reference in my podcast. How cool is that? If you can imagine a double-bladed lightsaber, one white and one magenta, and turn the course bar around, that lightsaber will essentially pivot on that waypoint and spin around, and we can pick any inbound and outbound track around that waypoint, as long as they're 180 degrees opposed to each other. You can't bend it. Not quite up that cool sort of thing yet. All right. So the omni bearing selector, or the obstruction mode in this case, will stop that turn from happening. The problem is a lot of people like to do it 1 or 2 miles prior to the waypoint. And if you've already crossed through the point where that turn back outbound starts, then you're going to get yourself a little bit confused, because eventually the track will change. So it'll go from a heading up to the northeast at the left-hand side of the triangle to a southeast track, but it's still going to talk to Bravo for the time being. And then if we obs it too late, the course that we actually want is going to be pointing the wrong way, and we can start getting a little bit disorientated and confused. Now, I've had plenty of people tell me that you can't push the OBS button until here. This is completely not true. And if you've listened to some of my IFR podcasts, you'll know that I've said this plenty of times before. If you're on your track to the destination, you can obstruct the flight plan, press the OBS key 1,000 miles out, 100 miles out. Right? You're never going to be 1,000 miles out like that. But the point is, it makes no difference how far out you suspend the flight plan. But it can if you do it too close, given the scenario now. All right, a couple of weeks ago, my night student was flying down to Bachelor, which is about 25 minutes or so, 20-minute flight down south of Darwin. And we're then pretty much from Bachelor coming straight back to Darwin. And it was probably good 8-9 miles north when the GPS started turning him around and got all sorts of confusion going on because we didn't think about the GPS was going to go one way, but we were just focused on Bachelor. That's where he was going. So you need to remember this. And if you've got quite an acute angle as your next waypoint, you want to get that OBS selection sorted out nice and early. All right. So hopefully that clears things up a little bit. I know, like I said, I'm trying not to describe tracks and things in and outbound in a podcast, trying to visualize it in your head, but hopefully you stuck with me. And have a bit of a play with the OBS. Once you've turned the knob, go to the map screen on your GPS. You'll see my dual-wielded lifesaver spinning around the waypoint, and you'll get an idea of what's going on there as well. Remember as well, if you've got an iPad, there's a lot of Garmin apps that are free. You can get the GTN 650 and 750 simulator trainer on your iPad for free. There's one for the Garmin GTI. Touchscreen, or the TX, sorry, the GTI is a car, but yeah, the TX, 3TX systems and Garmin 500 style setup. So you can start playing around and getting familiar with all these units and know what it does so that when you're paying the big bucks in the airplane, you're far better set up. All right, everyone. I hope that clears things up a little bit, and thank you very much for listening. Quite a few of you have come on Patreon lately. Can I just say thank you from the bottom of my heart? Your subscription support means the world to me and is absolutely enabling me to do this podcast and also some of this work that's going to be coming up soon with forums and other bits and pieces where we can put this stuff on. I can get to the people we need to and really hash these issues out and make some positive change. The other thing, talking about change, is you may be aware the exam questions have moved across to a new provider. So Aspect that are running the exams at the moment, that's where you go to sit the exam. They are now taking over and rewriting the questions. So I'm very pleased to hear that, and I'm very much hoping that a lot of the question-isms that are in there will be updated and changed and made better and easier, so we're actually getting a fair question, and that will be a very good news thing indeed. So we'll find out more about when that new data bank is coming out and any changes that are going to be needed to sit those exams, and I'll 100% be letting you know about that as soon as I find out any more. All right, but thank you to all my Patreon members for coming on board. Remember, you can get on board too. You can make a one-off donation. You can be a basic or mid-level or high-end supporter of the show and the work that I'm doing. And like I said, it's all tax deductible. $5 a month, even just one coffee a month. If you reckon I'm worth one coffee a month for everything you're listening and everything you're gaining from this podcast, then consider jumping on and subscribing. All the links are in the episode description below, but you can just go to patreon.com/Flight Training Australia and all the information's there. Remember as well, there is a free subscription, and I'm putting on, not the last 2 weeks, unfortunately, because I've just been so flat out, but I will get this week's one up. a blog style article with extra learning and extra information as well, which goes straight into your inbox, or you can read it online on the website. And again, I would love your feedback or interaction to let me know that you're reading it and enjoying it. And if there's any topics you'd like me to write about over above or talk about on the podcast, again, let me know that as well. All right, everyone, thank you for listening. Your support means the world, and I really look forward to talking to you again next week. I've got some fantastic interviews coming up very, very soon too. Just trying to lock down the dates. And the 150th episode, if you can even believe that, is coming up as well. And that is going to be another multi-guest podcast. So I am in the process now of looking in some special guests to talk about their careers in aviation, like I've done the last 2 times. For the 100th and I missed the 50th one, but the episode 69, I did the first one, and share some stories of people that are up here trying to get work, how it's gone, older pilots, younger pilots, trials, successes and failures, and share that information again to help all of you with your own individual careers and journeys. All right, I'll stop yapping. Take care, guys, and remember the golden rule: aviate, navigate, communicate. Cheers, everyone.